My name is John, and this is Please Allow Me. Today we talk to a real hidden gem. He's a great conversationalist, a thought provocateur, a public educator, and a grappling savant. Please allow me to introduce Sean Patrick Fisher. Hello, Sean.
Hey, what's up, John?
Not much. Thank you for coming to my little nest of freedom here, the last bastion of open thought and free speech.
I thank you.
Yeah, it's good to have a drink, and as you like to say, judge good and ill of all men.
Yeah, big time.
What book is that from?
I don't know if it's a book. It's like a short story by a guy, Stephen Crane. And I think the story is called The Open Boat.
I don't know why I just assumed it was some sort of Cormac McCarthy.
Yeah, I mean, he's the
Cormac
man.
McCarthy. Yeah.
He's got a lot of cool lines also. But yeah, that one is Open Boat's good.
I like to do that. What's going on at school? You teaching remotely?
Well, no, this week was the first week where we tried out hybrid, basically. So for my particular school, there's 4 cohorts. So like theoretically, you're supposed to have a quarter of your class at a time. Uh-huh. But kids also have the ability to choose remote for the whole year. So really, you're only like, the numbers are all messed up. So it was like, honestly, it was kind of odd and pretty difficult. But it was also just the first week. So it might just be, I thought the same thing when we started all remote, and hopefully get into a groove, figure stuff out.
It's amazing what you can get used to.
Yeah, absolutely. It was like bumpy this week. I feel, unfortunately, we started the week before the Thanksgiving week, which is going to be short and whatever. So
people don't want to do anything anyway.
Yeah, it'll be like maybe a little bit of a bunny week next week, and then have to try again when we get back. So,
well, it's also like a week before everyone's crying about locking shit down again.
Well, right. Yeah. Well, that's also the weird thing is like, is it just, are we going to do it for a couple weeks and then realize, oh my God, everyone went home. Like people went to different states and now COVID's spreading faster or more or whatever. And we got to pivot and go back to remote. So I don't know. It's kind of
it's a mad world out there.
It is a mad world.
And how have you found the remote teaching? Have you found it to be effective or ineffective, or can you tell one way or the other?
I think the bottom line is it like pales in comparison to just regular in school, like in-person education. I mean, I get why we have to do it, but the reality is it's just not up to par. That you need, like, for high school kids at least, like you need in-person interaction, because a lot of it has to do with sort of like reading each other emotionally.
Right.
Like understand, even just knowing what someone looks like for whatever reason seems to matter a lot. And so like I had students coming in this week that it's like, I maybe have seen them on video if they turn their camera on, and then they come in and they have a mask on. So you only see like this, if like you're knocking on a speakeasy door and you see a little part of their eye, like that's all you get to see. And it's like, I don't even know if they're my student or not. So it's just weird.
So our 15 and 16-year-old kids who are not in school, do they go on Hinge and Bumble to date because they're not in school and they can't kick it to anybody? So, how are they doing the things that 16-year-olds do?
To be honest, and I'm happy this is the answer, I have no idea.
Okay. Consider getting a little bit more in touch with your student base. I would think that would be a major component of it, is the social interaction.
No, I think that I'm sure people have made the argument before that that's like the point of going to school, or at least maybe not the point, but functionally as it works out, that's the main thing that kids learn is like socialization. And that can mean a bunch of different things. It can be like socialization with and among your peers, but also socialization where like you're engaging with emotionally stable, hopefully adults that can serve as like role models of, upstanding behavior and stuff like that. So
So the social interaction is one thing, and I think that I personally think it's the most important thing, especially considering the skills that are taught when you're a kid and what you tend to use when you grow up. But like, do school districts or the Department of Education, do they have a mission statement? Like, what are they saying that the public school system is supposed to provide for kids?
Yeah, I'll speak for like social studies education, at least in Massachusetts, right? Like each state has their own state standards, right? And more or less, if you pare it down and try and like pull out the one sentence like purpose of the standards and everything is to make a good citizen, I would say, is kind of captures most of the ideas of like what the standards are and what content you're supposed to teach in various history classes and yada yada.
So what the fuck is a good citizen?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are lots of different ways you can like slice and dice it. You could say maybe it would be like a useful member of society, but then also I think that has its own questions, like what constitutes useful. You could be, it must be more than just like going and getting a job, right? Because you could get a job that does something that like hurts the society as a whole, right? Like
what?
I don't know. Maybe I don't want to offend anyone here.
No. This, like I said, you're in the nest of freedom here. Offend away.
I don't know. Maybe someone who ends up working at some high level, like some sort of defense company that makes like weapons that end up like, killing people halfway across the globe. Like you're in terms of like the money you make for and I realize like there's a reason that there are defense companies. I'm not saying that we should all just like hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but it's not obvious what is like the most necessary thing that we need in society, and people can just go and get jobs, and maybe it goes to the good and maybe it goes to the bad.
So that's more of a philosophical difference then.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what classes do you teach in a semester?
I teach world history, modern world history. So like you basically start at 1750 and go forward, and you hit like the major events of world history. And then I teach psychology, and I teach another class that's honestly, it's basically a civics class for freshmen. But it's also meant to give freshmen an opportunity to sort of like practice basic skills, reading and writing, like analysis, research, argument, stuff like that.
I feel like all these like history classes that can say like modern world history or whatever, they start around the same time. What was going on in 1750 that makes people say that's modern? I know like the only history I know is baseball history, and the modern era starts at a specific time because of record keeping. Right.
Okay. Yeah. So I think the way I would say it is that 1750 is sort of like a nice even year where you start to see like industrialization happen. That's like the marking point there is like we move from like largely agricultural and feudal society to like industry, factories, capitalism, free market, trade all over the place.
And what year did George cross the Delaware? I don't want to put you on the spot.
What year did George cross the Delaware? I don't know, 1770. I don't know.
I've read that where they cross the Delaware is like 2 feet deep and 10 feet wide.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you know this, but I grew up literally like 12 miles from there, like down the street.
Oh, I didn't know you were that close to that.
No, yeah. Oh. I grew up like more or less on the Delaware River, swam in the Delaware River.
Oh, you're steeped in American history.
Yeah. Washington's Crossing was like down the street. I guess I should know the year he crossed. What was he going to do? Attack the Germans, the Hessians.
Bro, right? You're the history teacher.
On Christmas, right?
Yeah, I mean, was it on Christmas?
I think it was.
Okay, so then I take my comment back because I kind of belittled his achievement in basically puddle jumping over that little river he went over.
Sure.
But if it's freezing fucking cold, I mean, that's a whole nother thing. I mean, they had wool on. They probably got soaked. I mean, the risk of gangrene was probably frostbite.
And also, I think the equipment that they have, you could probably not, you can't compare it to modern technology.
No. But we often do that. We like to compare people's accomplishments in one era to what we value today. And we forget about things like, what the culture was like at that time, what tools people had,
prevailing attitudes.
Yeah.
Context is very important.
All that good stuff. So when you're teaching in class, do you consider yourself a history expert?
No, absolutely not. I don't think I'm a history expert at all. I think I'm someone who is, every history teacher is different. There are definitely high school history teachers out there that would deem themselves history experts. And like, that's their thing. Like they love like the nitty gritty of, the, various pieces of history, if not like anything they can get their hands on. For me personally, I think I just, I'm more interested in what I like, maybe like a bird's eye view of things, like seeing how pieces fit together. I would say I'm more interested in like the overall shape of things. And then sort of like the different arguments you can make about, you may call it like the philosophy of history or something like that. I'm not sure exactly.
So do you think when you're teaching something, it's more important that you are a master of the subject matter or that you just know a little bit more than the people that you're teaching?
It can go in a bunch of directions. I think that for certain things, and it depends on what level you're learning this to, right? Like if I was a college professor and I was teaching a history class about like, I don't even know, like the agrarian people of the early Americas or something, right? And
the pre-Marxist utopia.
Yeah. What's up with hunting? Then absolutely you need to be a master of the subject matter there, right? Because it's so detailed and it requires a lot of like, you need to consume a lot of like information and material to have it really anything interesting to say about it. But I think you can also teach people a lot, especially young people. Like there's a difference between teaching an adult something and then teaching like high school kids, because the fact of the matter is in high school, the reality is that when you're 30 years old, what do you really recall from your high school history class? Not a lot. Not a lot in terms of detail, but you might recall, or you might have been able to use like certain practices or skills that you engaged in that high school class. Or the reality too is that probably you may or may not even remember who taught those classes. One or two teachers in your whole high school experience might stick out to you, and they're not going to stick out to you because you taught them about, I don't even know, the Battle of the Bulge, but you're going to remember them because they, made some sort of human impact on you.
I remember my history teacher in high school in 10th grade when I learned U.S. history from Tom Butler. Nice. And the thing I learned in that class was spite. I learned how spite worked because he hated me so much. And I think he just thought I was a meathead and he was going to bully me around and like give me a really shitty grade. Yeah. So that's, I think, the first academic class I actually tried hard in because I didn't want to give that motherfucker a chance to give me a bad grade. Mm-hmm. So every turn I could, I tried to outfox him and outdo him and be a better student than he thought I could. And in reality, now that I'm saying it and the words are coming out of my mouth, I wonder if he was playing me the whole time and that was his whole mission.
Right.
If so, mission accomplished, Tom Butler, if you're still out there.
If you're out there and listening.
I don't think so. I think he legitimately hated me.
It could be. And maybe, I don't know, it feels to me like there's a lot of lessons in there. Sometimes the lessons are not the ones that are explicitly taught, Yeah,
that's true.
I would say also, sorry, I feel like I sort of veered off when I was answering that question before. The fact is you can do both things. You can teach someone something by being a total master of the subject. And I think in most cases that's better. Like to know way more than the other person, you're going to be able to help them through the content, whatever it is that you're teaching them, so much better and guide and facilitate their like discovery of what you think is important to discover, because you have like the lay of the land. But it's also true that let's say you're a high school teacher and it's your first year teaching or whatever, and you're teaching a new subject, or not necessarily a new subject, but a class that you're not particularly well versed in. It's like driving in the fog, right? Like you only see 3 feet in front of you, but you can make it the whole way like that. Right. Gotcha.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah. So it does work. And again, I think teaching high school is different than, for example, teaching jiu-jitsu, like, or any martial art or like a physical skill.
Right.
where teaching high school kids has a lot to do with the social, emotional, like sort of relational element, and the content, like the academic content, is either sort of sitting next to that or maybe even secondary to it.
So is it more important for you as a teacher to understand how the kids think and work and operate in their social circles? Or is it more important for you to understand how to disseminate the information to them? Or are they not separated? Is it one and the same?
I think they might not be one and the same, but they're so closely related that it sort of lives together, and it's like its own little energetic system or something like that, right? Like, I don't think you need to know about them in their social circles. I don't think that's what like a teacher is about. Like, that's their own thing. Like, that's sort of like they're figuring that out on their own. I think like a good teacher in high school is, again, it's like you're offering like an image or a model of like emotional stability, like upstanding behavior. Like you're showing kids like, okay, you can like talk to an adult in a way that's like grown up without, having to always like defer to authority and sort of like tail between your legs sort of way. Like, I don't know, there's a lot going on there. It's about like the relationship with students, and then academically, if the relationship is right, the academics come out of that.
So,
or built up on top of that, maybe is a better way to say it.
So really them interacting with an adult is another way to make them positive members or productive members or whatever you said, members of society.
Yeah, I think like, and maybe this is, I can see how this could be all understood as sort of like idealistic or something.
Right, that's cool.
But no, and also I don't even think it is that idealistic. It's just like here's an example of how I want to see other adults behave in society. You students will eventually be adults in society. In my opinion, I guess it's sort of it's an opinion thing or whatever. It's like, it would be great if other people acted like this. Like, simple things: show up on time, you have a plan, like you're not mailing it in, right? Like
things that are not coachable,
right? Like you're engaging with people as like individual human beings, and not sort of like projecting on them sort of whatever is going on in your own life. You're able to like sort of bracket those things and like behave in a way that's positive for them. I think all of those things sort of like smash together and become maybe as much of a lesson as any like individual lesson about like, capitalism in the Industrial Revolution. So
in terms of like shaping these kids into positive members of society and like, kind of helping them and coaching them along and interacting with adults, who holds more sway? Instructors, teachers, or parents?
I think false dichotomy. It's not one or the other. It's like the social environment of kids at home, I think, has way, way more of a pull on who that person becomes. And I think if people are lucky, they might experience like a teacher that just gives them a glimmer of someone who they realize like, oh, that's, people can be like that. Like, there's someone who, again, is like emotionally stable or like interacts with me in a positive way, like holds me to like high standards without doing it in like a condescending way where it's sort of like, where it's like looking down on someone or whatever. But I think like the social environment of like kids when they're, and this is way before high school, like little kids, right? Like that social environment, like, and what their parents are like and what's going on in their house or whatever is like, this is not even an opinion. It's like a real studied thing. It's like people's brains are not formed, right, until you're like, 25 or something like that. And there's a crucial period from like ages 0 to 3 or something where your brain is being shaped by the environment that you're existing in, and it's creating, it's sort of like creating the way you're going to relate to the world later on. So I see all these parents and they put an iPad in front of these kids with a screen full of fucking bubbles ascending from the bottom to the top. Like, how's it affecting the development of these kids from 0 to 3? I feel like and I want to preface this with, the opinions of Please Allow Me podcast are not necessarily the opinions of Sean Patrick Fisher. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I just feel like if those are the real formidable years and parents, it's almost like a contract, right? It's like all right, you're going to do this, you're going to have a kid, and your job is now to raise this kid or whatever however you arrive at that point in your life. And just like shoving an iPad full of bubbles in front of them is not the necessarily the right thing to do, especially when they're in their most formidable years. It kind of seems to me like more of a cop out and a lazy man's way of raising these kids. And then they shove them off into the school system and they say, oh, the teachers didn't do the right thing. The teachers did the wrong thing. When really at home, the inmates are running the asylum, it looks like, anecdotally to me as just a casual observer.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I would say, as someone who does not have kids, it would be wrong for me to sort of like to make, indignant judgment about like the behavior of parents. Like I totally can see a scenario in which like you're sleep deprived and you're just sort of like trying to make it through the day. You're working your own job. You're doing what you can. And, you end up sort of like assuaging a kid by putting the thing in front of them because it's almost like a form of medicine or something.
Yeah.
At the same time, I also get that, to some extent you've signed up for this and you have to therefore, take on that responsibility. But
millions of parents have come before you without the screen full of bubbles, and they've done an okay job working and doing all the other things and everything else like that. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying it seems to be in my opinion, probably those kids that are raised on the bubbles and the screens and everything, they're going to be a little bit more fucked up when they grow up. And it seems like a lot of times people think that's the only way to do it, and it's clearly not.
No, yeah, and I think that I think that anyone's like environment is way more probably than we would like to accept, is way more influential on one's behavior, and just the fact that we live in a world where we have the option to put the bubble screens in front of kids probably makes it such that like just at a population level, a huge percentage of people are going to do that, right? Right or wrong. And I think it's just like sort of like a contextual environmental thing. But even then, like when I say like the formative years for kids are when they're like 0 to 3, like their brain is developing. I'm not even talking about like the putting a cell phone or an iPad in front of them. I'm more talking about like much more sort of like turmoil in their house, like that type of stuff. I think more people than we realize grow up with like with situations and scenarios where they're just like a little kid that has no possible way of understanding what's going on around them, and they're being taught implicitly about like how relationships are supposed to be, how the world is supposed to work, and then they're sort of like a prisoner of that early formation when they had no say in the matter. So, and probably this is another false dichotomy. Are you a nature or nurture guy? It's just both. There's both. That whole argument is antiquated. It's not nature. You're like your genes are like turned on and off, right, by like your environment. Your environment and your brain are in a conversation with each other and sort of developing, like it's like co-evolution together. And so I think that it's just nature and nurture, and then you have to deal with the fallout of it in any case. Do you think you think our public education system is doing what they set out to do? Do you think they're accomplishing their goals by producing productive members of society? I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if there's any way to say if they're just like looking around, you probably would go no, right? Like it sure seems like that's not the case. I would say no, but I'm a curmudgeon. No, that's fair. Yeah. I don't know. It seems like if you look around, you would say no, and it seems like there are just so many problems in the world that like, and in whatever American society, it can't possibly be the case that it's getting the job done. And it just, I mean, I think there's a lot of like antiquated ideas about how kids should be treated or taught or whatever. And I think it's like a matter of momentum, unfortunately, where it's like, well, we've just always done it this way. So well, how should they be taught? We're going to keep the ball rolling. I can't profess to know an answer to it. No, but you're a smart guy. So I'll say that I want to, whatever. I've been teaching for 4 years, like formally.
You've been teaching formally for 4 years, but you substituted before that, and you've been teaching jiu-jitsu, which is still teaching, although different subject matter. So it's not
right. I guess I would say just I come from the perspective of like, I certainly don't have the answers, but I'm someone who's very interested in thinking about.
That's why you're here, dude.
Things. Yeah. Okay. So how should they be taught? I guess my thought is that there's not a lot in school that's like, I never heard mentioned when I was like growing up and in school, and I never hear mentioned now. And I guess I could do a better job of this. I hardly ever mention like what does it mean to live like a meaningful life? There's no like, I feel like if that was the perspective, it would catch all of the other things. Like embedded in that is probably being a good citizen, right? Or like or being a useful member of whatever the society is.
So we need to be teaching existentialism to ninth graders.
Maybe something else. I don't know. Existentialism, people can at least exposing
right.
Maybe bigger ideas like that. And I understand that not everyone is the same. Like I might be more interested in those sort of like heady ideas, whereas other people are much more like concrete, and they want to know how to do a thing. Like I want to know how to build a house. That's what I'm going to do with my life.
Right.
That would be a perfectly useful member of society. There should be an option for that. And it happens to be super meaningful because people need houses to be built. Like, so.
Are there no more vocational schools around? Like my brother went to a tech school.
No, there definitely are. In the high school that I teach at, there's like basically a tech school embedded in the high school itself.
What do they teach? Is there like auto shop and carpentry and
totally, yeah, metal fab. Nice. There's like a
home ec.
Not home ec, I don't think. I don't know. No, but there is like a culinary like track that you can be on. You can be on the track to end up becoming like a nurse or someone who works in like the medical profession. See,
all that I think is really cool. My only issue with it is, do the kids at that age know what they're going to wind up being? I feel like as society kind of progresses, it seems almost like kids have less of an idea of where they want to end up at a certain stage, and I don't think that that's wrong. I don't think that's wrong. Like, you know, I think I just read a statistic the other day that said now worldwide, over 50% of people aged 20 to 29 still live with their parents, which compared to 1960 was like
worldwide, you're saying?
Worldwide.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But like in 1960, that statistic was like 12%.
Worldwide also?
Yeah. Yeah. So like people were just leaving the house or whatever. And I don't want anyone to fact check me and call me up and say that I'm wrong, because I probably read that in a haze on my phone at like midnight while I was trying to sleep.
Well, I would say like embedded in what you just said, let's take it as true. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it's like in America. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. But embedded in what you just said is like an argument that, and correct me if I'm wrong, an argument that number should be low. Like that would indicate in your mind, that would indicate some sort of progress. In
my mind, that number should be lower because rather than like, I mean, I don't know if what you mean by progress is like progress of the individual or progress of society. What I think, rather than progress, when I see that number climb, I think dependence. And I think the longer we're dependent on people, it might stifle your own personal development. And I think part of that is, and I think we're going to get into this probably eventually, would be like the way that like the college education system is structured. And we've talked about this before, but I think if you count the 80s in 1989, I've been in school in some capacity in every decade since then, including this one. Mm-hmm. So I've seen all kinds of...
you've got the lay of the land in terms of like trends and whatnot.
Trends and everything else. So
I hear that. I would say like... I feel like part of what you're communicating is sort of an idea about individualism that I don't know how great it is. Individualism and independence are different. And I think and maybe I'm saying it wrong, but I think independence is what I'm striving for and less individualism. What would constitute independence? Independence would be someone who can make their way through the world on their own. Someone who's got the tools and skills to survive. My friend says it really well. He's like, look, I'm not here to be my kid's dad. I'm here to give you the skills so that if I die tomorrow, you can live in this world on your own and not have to depend on anyone else. Now, obviously, if you're 2, you're going to need to depend on someone else.
but you shouldn't need to depend on someone else if you're 18. If you're 18, you should be able to figure it out. And I don't think that kids have those skills right now. I think that like I get the sense that we've, as a society, we've given people too many excuses for not being independent. I think it's harder to be more individual than it is to be independent. You can be independent and still not be an individual, but if you're independent, you're at least like you're functioning on your own. And when should someone snatch out the tablecloth from underneath the plate settings, you'll be all right. And I don't get the sense that a lot of people are.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm trying to formulate my thoughts as a response to all of that. My what I was thinking partly as you were talking was that I feel like part of what you're saying is this idea that you ought to be independent, or that it's possible to be independent in a certain almost like absolute way. And I disagree with that. No man is an island. Everyone is dependent on each other in a million different ways. Like the web of interconnectivity is so powerful that while we might sometimes want to believe that we've gotten certain places on our own, and that doesn't mean that people don't work really hard to get certain places on their own. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think the way I read what you said can make it seem like you should just be like sort of put the walls up and figure out I can just move through this world on my own. And I should actually like beat myself up or something if I'm unable to do it. And I think that there needs to be a more like, for lack of a better term, like an intelligent way of slicing and dicing the world to figure out, okay, I need to be dependent in various ways. Like that's the way we are. I also need to be independent in other ways. And then I feel like school should probably focus on teaching people how to be independent in the right ways, instead of promoting maybe like an attitude that it's like, I need to untether myself from the necessity of other people. That to me feels like maybe the wrong path.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
So in terms of like talking about dependence, I think that you're right. There are certain things that every human being will have to depend on other humans for. And I think largely those are social needs and like emotional bonds and relational needs. But I think that the longer that we're financially dependent on other people, I think that it doesn't bode well for society at large, because we learn these lessons of other people helping us out. And at some point when you're fucking 30 and you're living in your parents' basement, and your mom's throwing a plate of, goulash down the stairs while you're playing Xbox 7, at some point when that goes away, you're going to turn to someone else to be dependent on. And that will eventually lead you to being dependent more probably on the state or the government. And, I think that, we're not going to get into crazy politics, but I think that's the cycle of dependency that I don't care for.
I understand what you mean there, but I think so. The little like image you just painted there it communicates a lot about what you don't. That's not about financial independence, what you just said. Like it includes financial and dependence on your parents in that case, right? But the person who's in that situation, with the understanding that that's a little bit of like there are certainly people like that, I guess, but it might just be, it's sort of a caricature of a situation to make a point, which I understand, is like that involves.
No, I know several people like that.
Fair. All right.
I got to get those people out of my fucking life.
But that in my head, that speaks more to like emotional dependence, like an inability to sort of like no one wants to. Do you know anyone that wants to live like that? It doesn't mean that. And what I mean by that is you could say something like, well, like you just have to sort of like buckle down and do the right things to escape that situation. And that's fine that you can say that. But the reality is, in my own opinion, no one wants to be that person. There are like factors at play that are not making that person be like that. They play a role in it. But also there are factors that are so influential and like pressing on that person's condition that it's hard for me, and maybe I'm just like a softie or something. It's hard for me to like place tons and tons of blame on the individual there.
Well, I'm not blaming the individual, but I agree with you that no one wakes up and says, man, I can't wait until I'm 28 and I finally get that basement apartment in my parents' house. Like, babes are going to love me when they come over and I got to bring them in through the fucking cellar door at 2 a.m. Nobody wants to do that. But I think that when posed with the option, which is in a lot of cases, hard work to not be in that situation, it doesn't become a matter of what you want. It just becomes a matter of what you want to do less. And I think some people, not all people, I think there are people who don't always want to do that level of work. And for some people, it takes more work than others. No question about it. Some people just are, have a fortunate set of circumstances, but some people, it would require work that they're not willing to do. And so maybe they didn't wake up and that's their dream life. But I mean, that's fucking where you are. And to get out of it takes work and you just don't feel like doing that.
I understand. Yeah. I understand that. I'm really hesitant to accept, and I'm sure we've talked about this a million times. Like, I don't personally.
Not on record.
Not on record. Now it is. That like sort of like the hard work gospel where it's just sort of like, you're just like to this hypothetical individual, right? Like you just need to sort of buckle down and do the hard work necessary to get out of your situation. It's like the people in those situations, I don't believe they don't want to be there. And it's not like necessarily they know exactly what they have to do or that it's even within their like conscious understanding of what the first move is there.
So whose job is it to teach them the first move?
It might not be anyone's job. I don't know whose job it is. I guess you would say maybe we could pull it back to the kind of start of the conversation and say, ideally, it's the school's job to like teach people either the skills necessary to get out of those situations or the I don't even know, beyond skills or like just even the understanding of like where to go from that situation. But I just feel like people, if it's real life, people in that situation, it's a whole set of factors altogether. It's like, have you ever heard of this idea of like a biopsychosocial model of like a human being or psychology?
Is that like a Biosphere with Pauly Shore?
Unfortunately not. No.
Great flick. Check it out.
But the basic idea of that is like biopsychosocial. Your biology, your psychological sort of framework, your like schema for understanding the world, and your social environment, they're interconnected in like an inseparable way. And it seems to me like someone in this like hypothetical scenario, it's such a mountain to climb, and it's not that the person no one should throw up their hands, I guess, and say like, this is just insurmountable, this is my lot now. But it's just that it's not, in my opinion, if all that it took was hard work, way more people would get out of the situation. Hard work is not like that's not the thing, in my opinion, that's holding the people down. I think it makes a lot of us like sleep better at night to know that it's like we're not in that situation. And really what's keeping those people down is they're just unwilling to do the hard work necessary to get out of it. And of course, there are definitely people that are choosing not to do that. But for the lion's share of the people in this hypothetical situation, I think that it's when we talk about hard work or whatever, it's for us. It's not about the reality of their situation. And I don't really know what ties that all together, but that's my
I think it's a perspective thing, and it could be like a slightly related to like a generational gap that we have, because, well, I like to think that I'm someone who's willing to have my mind changed. There's a humongous part of me that does attribute it to not entirely hard work, because hard work's not the end all be all. There's some circumstance involved there, but I do believe that working harder will cure a lot of ills. I mean, there's people like who, bitch and complain about not working and stuff like that. I mean, right next to the gym, that Dunkin' Donuts has a new crew in there every week. The turnover is outrageous. We have jobs, we have things available, we have things that people can do, but I just feel like they're not willing to do them.
But what makes you like, so you've diagnosed the turnover at that Dunkin' Donuts, you've diagnosed as an issue of hardworking individuals that you've never met before. Like, how can you be so sure that that's the thing that's lacking for them? What you just simply, and I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying you just don't know. So to diagnose that problem like that is maybe it might be misleading.
I may have misspoke, because what I was addressing is like, I hear from a lot of people who are in like dependent relationships with family, or like living at home at 30 or whatever. Mm-hmm. I may have misspoke, because anecdotally, a lot of them tell me like, oh, there's no jobs, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. Mm-hmm. And really what they want to say is, there's not a jobs problem, there's a dream jobs problem. Mm. And there's nothing in the universe that says you're guaranteed to at some point get your dream job. In my opinion, and totally opinion, at some point what you have to do is you got to say, well, I need some type of job. And even if I have to eat shit for a little while and like do a job that I don't want to, just to make enough money to pay my own goddamn cell phone bill or whatever it is, at some point you got to do that. And I think there's an unwillingness, and almost it's now much more accepted than it was like when I was a kid, and certainly than when like my parents were a kid. Mm-hmm. But I think, we'll have, the question then becomes, if our education system is to make these positive, strong members of society, and on some level we can agree that, well, I don't want to say that. I don't want to say on some level we can agree, but on some level it seems like we're not making those positive members of society. Then it begs the question, are we teaching the right things?
Oh, okay. So there's like a couple things.
There's a couple things in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So like the personal accountability part of it is really understandable, but I just feel like a lot of times in maybe like public discourse or whatever, or me and you talking like this, or in the minds of individuals, in my own humble opinion here, I think that a lot of times that, for whatever reason, becomes like the main thing, as if that's like the whole issue. And I think that probably it's not. I think that the pull of the environment and like the context of whatever it is you're living in, and like I said, like your biology, your literally like what's happening in your body, like guides your behavior in a way that is like, unfortunately, I think we don't have like the type of free will that we would like to have. And I think to sort of put the onus on this, like, it's just about personal accountability. Like, you can see where you have to go. You just have to go get a job at McDonald's and work up from there or something. It's just like, in my opinion, it flattens everything. It's way too simplified. There are a lot of things at play, and I don't profess to have the answers, nor do I think that like we should just throw our hands up and say like, oh, just let all that happen or something.
But isn't the opposite true? If you're saying that like we don't have this free will, and like, there are all these other circumstances that determine our lot in life and like where we are positionally, and that hard work won't dig us out of this. If we accept that, are we saying then that everything's predetermined, and then we've just given everyone an excuse to not do the hard work and not try and put themselves in a better position?
No, good question. I don't intend to say that, though I understand how, like, you could, given the nature of this argument, I understand how you could read what I said as that. I don't mean to say that. What I'm saying is that the personal accountability part is a piece of it. But I think what I often hear from people is that it's the main piece. Like, that's the thing, that's the keystone that if you put into place, everything else would click. And I think that it would be helpful, but I think there are other things. Maybe think of it like this. You've had like knee surgeries before, right?
Right.
You have to you have the knee surgery. Do you start physical therapy the next day, the personal accountability part, or do you have to heal to a certain extent before you can start the physical therapy? And that's just like a function of maybe you could call it environment, or sort of like the surrounding context doing work without your conscious input, and then you have to like pick things up and do it on your own, and the knee won't heal the right way unless you do that stuff. But also maybe you have to get to a point first before. And again, I'm not saying that I know the answer to get people to that point. I'm just saying that I think there are other factors in play, and then maybe they're like societal or cultural or contextual or economic or whatever they are. Like, I just think there are other things that people need to get to the point where they can even engage with the idea of personal accountability.
So the knee surgeries I've had, and I don't want to.
this is gonna turn into like an anecdote about how I crushed the knee surgery or whatever.
Well, you do prehab, so before the surgery happens, you already try and get strong.
Fine. Understand that. Oh, actually, okay, no, that actually speaks to my point. I think what that's saying, that goes back to like the early childhood stuff about like, kids who experience incredibly traumatic upbringings or whatever. Like, their brains are different than people who don't. And that's not their fault. Like, you can just be a child who's older than other children or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you just got older, but the like coping strategies and the defense mechanisms or whatever that you built up psychologically to deal with whatever turmoil it was happening to you early in life when you had no say, no agency in the matter. Like, that's what's running you as an adult.
But everyone's brain is different. And there are plenty of people who like grew up in like really posh situations and circumstances that suck at life. And there are plenty of people that dug themselves out of like some shitty spots. Totally. So to say, everyone's brain is different. And I just think like you're dealt a hand in life, and like you've got to figure out a way to play that hand to win.
That's true. I agree.
And I guess going back to like asking about, are we teaching the right things? Maybe a better way to put it is, you're in charge of Sean Fisher Island and you have 50 kids of various ages. Put them in whatever brackets you want. Like, pick 5 things you have to teach these kids, all of them up to age 17.
So this connects, everything will connect here. I think I also think that like the information is power, right? Like, knowledge is power. It sounds like a lame line, but I think it's true, right? I think the whole point is that you might be able to like teach people about this situation, that it's like, if the culture is telling you that the reason you're in your mom's basement is because you don't know how to work hard and everything about you that sucks is because you're just unwilling to do stuff, right, that would improve your situation, it's like, and that's not actually true about you, and there are other things that are influencing that creates like a negative feedback loop that feeds back into like the context that's causing you for whatever reason to be stuck in the basement. And I think that if you could teach people about the fact that maybe you grew up in an environment that like made your brain a certain way that is not it's created sort of like maladaptive behavior now as an adult, and you could not necessarily unwind it, but you could start to actually like process all of that stuff. Maybe you could then get on a better path where you get to the point where you can do like, the knee rehab, where you can get to a point where you can start to like engage with whatever the personal accountability, responsibility piece is, where you can get to that point. And now whatever goes. Okay.
So you've got a structure though for these kids. You've got a structure for all these kids on your island, 5 topics, not like 5 lessons you're trying to get across, but you're going to use like the topics, the subject matter that you get to pick and you get to teach as a scaffolding to achieve whatever the outcome you think is best for these kids. And maybe it's not the same as like what our public education system aims to do. Maybe you think there's something else that should be the end result there. What are the 5 subject matter topics that you're going to use as a scaffolding to teach these lessons?
All right.
It's a great question.
Yes. Nice.
Thank you.
It is a great question. Thank you, John Clark. 100%. There has to be something that's like physical, tactile. It doesn't mean you have to engage in like a sport. It could be something that's like, maybe you're making something, or maybe you're playing music, any sort of art, anything that like would be tactile and like makes you aware of your body, I think has to be in there. And I think it's like, based on what I've seen, it seems like that's like noticeably absent a lot from like regular high school or whatever. Of course you could take art classes, gym class, all that stuff. Right.
But I want to circle back to this when you're done with your classes.
There's not enough. I would say like maybe not enough of a focus on it. Also, I understand that they could be totally influenced by personal bias, but whatever.
Doesn't matter.
It's my Sean's
It's your core curriculum.
Yeah. I think there would have to, like, psychology in some way, shape, or form, or like just teaching you about your mind or whatever has to be a part of it. And like how like your biology and whatnot influence your like psychological states. So I guess you could just call that psychology for whatever reason, right? To teach you about yourself,
Right.
and how you function. I think that would probably be an important thing. I think there would have to be some form of, I don't know. Now I just get the sense that I'm going back to regular school, like being able to.
Not to me. It sounds like you're describing ancient Greece. What I'm hearing is wrestling and philosophy and psychology, and it sounds phenomenal.
Yeah.
Art. We're gonna sculpt some shit.
Right. I think it would be cool to like maybe like a class about like ethics or character or something. I understand why a lot of times that might be absent from public school, because it requires someone to answer like, well, what constitutes good character? And you might put yourself in a situation where I don't know, you violate the sensibilities of whatever parents in a district or something with a certain conception of good character. So I understand why it's tough in like regular public school, but I think to teach kids about like, no, here's a way where you could like engage with the world, and it would actually like, it would generate good outcomes for you, probably like on the whole.
Why do private schools have more luxury to do that? Like why can they get away with doing that? I mean, I literally took an ethics class in high school, and I went to a private school.
Oh, and by the way, I'm not saying that there's no ethics classes in public schools. There probably is. I think what I was just talking about was more along the lines of like a character education sort of thing.
Well, that leads me to another question, and I know you have 2 more classes that you got to put down for your core curriculum.
To be honest, I don't even know what the other 2 classes would be, so maybe you can ask your question.
Cool. So that leads me to another question, which is, are teachers supposed to be subjective when they teach certain topics, or should they try and maintain some sort of objectivity? When you teach a class like history or psychology or whatever, it seems, or any really like a social science, it seems like subjectivity would be a humongous determining factor in how the instructor teaches that. And one of the things that comes to mind is when I read articles, and obviously I'm not in high school anymore, but I would love to do like a go to school with Sean day one day and observe once the kids come back.
Bring your friend to school day.
Yeah, once the kids come back. But it seems like too often now on a university level and even like in a high school level, I read articles about teachers imparting their political views upon their students. Two questions. 3 questions.
Nice.
A, is that allowed? 2. What friction points could be put in place if it's not allowed to ensure that we're a little bit more objective in the way that we teach our students? And I forgot C.
Okay, nice. So like the articulated rule basically is like, no, a teacher in a public school. Now this is different than a private school, I suppose, but like a teacher in a public school is supposed to reserve their like political leanings in the teaching of the topic, whatever the topic is. Obviously, like it matters probably way more in like maybe the like humanities classes, right? Like history and English, you're much more likely to like hit on or psychology or whatever other humanities classes you can think of. You're a lot more likely to hit on topics that would be like politically charged. And the rule is basically like, reserve your own opinion here. Like behave in a way that makes the students ask or wonder, like, I don't even know who that guy voted for or whatever. At the same time, I think that there's no such thing even as like objectivity. I
agree with you on that. There's no objectivity.
Like who would it even come from? I don't know who could be objective, right?
But like, to get to as close to that point on the scale as you can while delivering the material.
Right. Maybe a better word is like impartial or something like something like that. For what friction points could you like put into place? I don't necessarily know. I think it just comes down to the individual's like sort of own discipline in like not being swept up so much that like, oh my God, I have to express my opinion to these people. You know what I mean?
So what happens when a teacher goes out there and they teach a class and like, I mean, I've seen clips of kids with their cell phones and stuff, and they're videoing teachers like in high school telling them who to vote for. What happens to that teacher if the rule is that they shouldn't be doing that?
to be honest, I don't know what happens to them. I feel like I personally make a pretty like concerted effort to not divulge any of my own political leanings or what I think about certain topics. Like that would be charged. I mean, like, again, the fact is that no one is like actually objective. So
are some of these teachers taking advantage of tenure? And what is tenure? What is that? Like you hear about that when you're in high school. I don't know what the fuck tenure is. And tenure to me is just like the teacher that's been in the school a long time.
Yeah.
And
basically it's like, I don't want to say that they're taking advantage of it. I think it's just like a human thing. I think that people are sort of understandably, especially in like a very charged political environment. I mean, if you really believe super hardcore that like your way is right and everybody is fallible, like it doesn't make it right. Like I'm able to withhold my own like political opinions. I feel like other adults should also be able to withhold theirs. But
do you think that makes you more effective in relaying the information that the students are intended to receive? The fact that you can do it like a little bit more impartially than, I mean, kids are smart, right?
Yeah,
you know,
totally. They get, yeah,
they get it when you're trying to send them some sort of a message.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I don't know if it makes me any better at relaying any messages, because the fact is, like, you in a high school history class, I mean, there are content standards that you have to hit. I mean, you're basically driven by what the state has told you have to teach, more or less, right? So, like, you're just teaching that material. If you so happen to come upon a topic where you end up discussing like current political events, like with a lot of my classes, I talked about the election, but I tried to do it in a way where I was just sort of like, here's what the electoral college means. Like, high school kids don't know what that means. I
didn't know what it meant.
High school, yeah, I didn't know what it meant either. Yeah,
right? I know a lot of grown-ups who still don't know what it means.
Tons of people don't. Yeah, totally. So it's like you teach them about that. You sort of talk to them about like here's how it's going. They're very expressive of their opinions, which is cool. Like that's what it should be. They're under no compulsion to not share their opinions, but you sort of have to wield the sort of the onslaught of their opinions in a way that does not like show your hand. It does make it hard, because you get into certain topics, if you're like, for example, discussing this last election, where it's like, it's hard not to show your hand.
Right.
Because I don't know, it just is, but you try your best not to. You basically just like defer back to them to allow them just an opportunity to say what they think. It does not matter if a ninth grader shares an opinion that's not like super refined. It's like, okay, that's cool. You're literally in ninth grade. It's fine that your opinion, that it's not informed by, you know.
But also nowadays it's
information.
It's probably a little bit harder because, like, as human beings, like the last couple of elections, we're so much more emotionally tied to a candidate than we are to the candidate's policies, that like when emotions are running high, it's difficult to express any thought around that topic without tipping your hand, like you said.
Yeah.
And probably like, you know, in the mid 80s or God knows way back when, I'm sure there was an emotional tie to these people, but the fact that we're literally in each other's living rooms and like watching people at these like town halls and, you know, these bullshit things where like, you know, the Republicans will walk into like small town diners and at, you know, in the middle America, like we're in each other's living rooms. And
right. Yeah.
It would be really difficult for us to not be as emotionally tied, even without all the social media bullshit that directs us. And like,
oh my God. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge piece of all of this whole conversation.
It does they work so hard to put everyone into one bucket. And it's not just like, they want you to believe one thing. It's that they want you to like have a visceral like dislike for the people in the other bucket. Yeah. And really, as we've talked about before, like anyone who thinks that they're in one bucket or the other 100%, to me, and this is just me, not Sean, I think you're an idiot. And I think
I won't necessarily co-sign on that exact language, but I would say if you're playing the team game, like you're just on team red or team blue, irrespective of the individuals and the ideas they're expressing, I just feel like you've maybe like missed the mark.
They say that most people are libertarian. They say if you take like the Nolan test, they say most Americans are libertarian, and that the society and the media and other politicians have us so fooled that they put us into one camp or the other. I would actually love to not talk about that too much, because I feel like my brain is very small and fried as it is.
Yeah. That's
So,
cool. I actually like, just on that, not on like libertarianism or whatever, but I think it's like an astute point is I think it was the dude Nassim Taleb, the Black Swan guy. And maybe he was stealing this from someone. I'm sure it's been said elsewhere too. He makes a great point about like the idea of politics, like political opinions, irrespective of scale, is stupid. Like with your family, you're a communist. With your like broader social circle, you're a socialist. With your, you extend out to your community or your town, and you're whatever it is, you're a democratic socialist. And then you move out and out, and it's like at the biggest perspective, you might be a libertarian.
right.
I think there's some good ideas in there about how we I think we associate ourselves with certain political parties and political leanings more as a matter of like our attitudes, temperaments, and identity, like a commitment to wanting to be perceived as a certain type of person, more than it has anything to do with like what you actually think is good for other people.
So everyone's just a virtue signaling hypocrite.
Everyone is a hypocrite for sure.
Everyone certainly is a hypocrite.
Yeah, us included. I mean,
no question about it. I mean, tomorrow I'm going to change my mind on half of this stuff. And I'll be screaming and yelling at myself. One of the things I have other friends who are teachers in different types of school systems. And like, I have a friend who is, she more or less was a gym teacher for like 15 years. And she's got like a master's degree in whatever it is, kinesiology. And her school, which is a parochial school, they've eliminated gym class. Like they don't even have, they eliminated recess, and then they eliminated gym class. That's a parochial school in another state. Where we are, do kids get to go out and like play ball anymore? Do they get to do anything, or is that too discriminatory?
I think, I don't, to be honest, I think it would be unfair of me to like make a judgment about what the gym teachers do, because I, to be honest, I don't know. And I don't pay tons of attention to like what their classes are like. I do know that, in my personal opinion, the physical part of education is, for whatever reason, gets like relegated to like the dumpster. Like it seems like they get put in the trash bin or whatever and by physical, I mean gym class, like, stuff like that. But also, like I was saying before, sort of like tactile things, like art doesn't get its fair due. I feel like music probably doesn't get its fair due.
Totally.
I think all of those sorts of things that you could like deem as artistic or physical for whatever reason get relegated to like the I don't know. They don't get enough play. And I think a lot of kids are like kind of like hungry for that.
Do you think that that's because when you go and like, you give a musical concert, you're studying a musical instrument, or you go and you compete in a sporting event or any of those things, there's almost like from the observer's standpoint, you can tell who's better. There's a winner and a loser in a wrestling match. You can tell who hit the clinker on the clarinet when they're, playing hot cross buns or whatever. But when you're grading a paper, there's almost a force that allows the people in charge of the grading to bring everyone to a more average middle. And therefore people are no longer on either end of the spectrum. And this is totally anecdotal by me. And therefore you have fewer people who feel like they're not as worthy as the people who are successful, which to me seems to be like a mission everywhere in the world, bringing everyone to this clumpy middle and forgetting about the outliers, because the outliers make everyone else feel bad in some way. The successful people make the non-successful people feel bad. The kids who are good at dodgeball make the kids who stink at dodgeball feel bad by throwing that red rubber ball in their mouth.
The red rubber balls. Yeah, classic.
Those are gone, right? Those and the pennies are out. No more rubber balls, no more pennies.
Well, there's certainly no pennies during COVID, but
no more kill the man with the ball.
I get what, right. Or like, yes.
It's just establishing a social hierarchy.
I definitely get what you're saying. Like it's maybe a lack of competitiveness or something, but are
we weaning it out of them, or is it no longer there because they're all looking at the bubbles when they're 3 years old?
Good question. I think that might be a little too simplified. Like I don't know what the forces are at play, but I would be surprised if it's about like wanting to, like, for whatever reason, everyone thinks that there's like this like make everyone feel good sort of movement. And that definitely is there for sure. I'm not convinced that that's the reason why there is like less gym class stuff going on, or like less like concerts going on or something. I don't even know if there are less. I'm like saying that, and you're saying that as if we know that there are less than there used to be. I'm not positive that that's the case. There might be more for all I know. But my only point is that there should be even more than there are now. Right.
Well, are there not, so this is a real question and I don't have the answer to it. Are you privy to any knowledge? Like, are kids in the public school system who are younger than high school kids, do they still get to go out on recess? Do they go to the playground, or is that no longer a thing?
I don't know about recess, and also all schools are different too. Like, so it could be, is there like a variety of things at play there? My wife's a elementary school teacher, and I know that her kids got to go out to recess. So that's cool for
lucky
her.
Little bastards.
But yeah, I don't know. I think I would sort of like resist the urge to like blanket all of this as a function of sort of like the
feel good trophy participate.
Yeah, right. Participation trophy.
Thank
sort
you.
of
CTE's really creeping in on me.
Yeah, right. I'm realizing as this is making me notice how much like if people hear this and they don't know me,
they're gonna think you're wicked smart.
No, they're gonna think that I'm totally like, everyone wins anything, like you just come and give me a hug, bro, like that type of thing. And it's like, I'm actually not like that, but
maybe you are, because we're pulling this out of you. Maybe this is exactly what you are.
Yeah, I actually think, I guess to a certain extent, I am sort of like this. But then also it's like, people are just so, there's so much more going on than just like the narratives you hear about the world, I guess is what it's making me realize. Because like, you're sort of asking me about like, is this what's going on? Is there this like movement more or less to like make people less competitive or something?
Well, I'm asking for clarity, because like we all live, no matter how hard we try, we all live somewhat in our own little echo chambers. And like, I know that everything that I think and see is not 100% accurate. Most of it is. But that's why I'm asking you these questions, because I don't want to form opinions on what's going on in the public school system when it's been a long time since I've been there. So your feedback is like helping to color my opinions and my theories on why everyone is fucked.
Right. Yeah. No, I guess what I would say is like, from my experience for the kids that I teach, it's like I really think, and I don't think I'm crazy here, like I think they desire more of what you would like advocate for, or what I would too, right? Like more opportunities to maybe like be competitive, or like be even just like closer with each other. There's a lot of like, outside of all the COVID stuff, obviously, you know, like social distance,
COVID.
Like outside of that, I think that there's like probably a desire by them to like, no, I want to be, like, it's not the kid's fault. Like, I just feel like, I guess that maybe that's maybe that's my point. No, it definitely is not. It's
but why not stand up? When I was in third grade, we wanted a dance. We wanted to have a dance, and they said, no, you have a dance when you're in sixth grade. And I was like, well, I feel like that's a load of crap. Like, I wanted to dance with Elizabeth O'Shea. And so, you know, we put up such a big stink that they gave us a little tiny dance. So isn't it the kid's responsibility to ask for what they want and then fight for it, even at a young age? Like, why are administrations neutering these kids' competitiveness?
I don't know why, but I just...
We don't even really know if it's true. So I'm asking you why, and we don't even know that that's true.
No, I understand. Yeah.
I think it is.
I think it's, again, I guess maybe as opposed to you, I think I consider maybe the things that like move people as like forces that are outside of their own control, and they're sort of like, everyone is living in their own context or whatever. And I just think that like, I don't know how to say it. I just, I know it sounds like I'm making concessions for everyone, literally. I know that's what it sounds like.
It doesn't sound like you're making concessions for everyone. It sounds like what you do is you try and find like an alternate way to understand the situation. And sometimes you make concessions, and sometimes you come to the conclusion that, you know, there's not a way to explain it other than, you know, some cold hard facts. But it doesn't sound like you're making concessions. It sounds like you're making more of an effort to understand a situation holistically than maybe I would.
Right. Like maybe for example, like if I'm like in the wrestling room and like helping a kid drill or whatever, he's made it to that point. The guy, he's in the wrestling room. He's drilling with me for whatever reason. And it's like the expectation there is like, if you mail it in here, you're leaving like so much on the table. Like we could get a good hard drill in, and that's exactly what should be happening. And there's literally no excuses. Everything is here, right here for you right now. Right. But like the other kid, for whatever reason, who is not in the wrestling room, but he quote unquote should be, because like that would be good for him. What I wonder is like, what are the things that keep him from walking into the wrestling room?
Because he doesn't want to work hard.
that I don't necessarily believe.
I know you don't.
I think that like he, I don't know. People don't want to be in bad situations.
So you're talking about being in the wrestling room with all these, with these kids and working and stuff like that. Like, I think that in combat sports should be the last meritocracy left in the world, really, like athletics and specifically combat sports. Mm-hmm. But then when we go to jiu-jitsu tournaments, it seems like they make a division so small because they want the maximum number of people to leave with a medal. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's a financial thing because they want people to feel good about it and come back, or if it's a symptom of the participation trophy culture that I perceive us living in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's probably a little mix of both. I would guess it has more to do with like a financial thing.
Yeah. Why are we not wrestling back for fourth place in a jiu-jitsu tournament? Why are there 2 bronzes? What a load of shit.
Yeah, I know. And unfortunately, I feel like I've gotten quite a few bronzes in my life as a result of maybe not as a result of the no wrestle back. Maybe I would have won, but you just never know. You can never say for sure that, okay, I would have been on the podium. And that's kind of an annoying thing.
Right. Yeah. So what are the similarities that you find in teaching like a scholastic endeavor like history or civics and when you teach jiu-jitsu?
I think that it's way different, but of course, like the fundamentals about like teaching someone like something that's content based is really similar. The jiu-jitsu, I mean, people who show up at a jiu-jitsu gym, the major difference is that they do that of their own volition and they want to show up and like they're interested in being a sponge most of the time. A lot of people, obviously, I mean, and we've talked about this like ad nauseum, like show up just for it's like an Instagram thing, which we can get into about like how Instagram's ruining jiu-jitsu. But
that's true. How about Gordo moving to Puerto Rico like it's like some anti-New York thing? Dude, you just don't want to pay the federal taxes. Kudos to you. You found the loophole.
Is that a real thing? That's where he's moving?
Yeah, he's moving to Puerto Rico. You have to live in Puerto Rico for 183 days and you don't have to pay federal taxes.
Oh, God.
The sacrifices.
It's like a Peter Thiel thing, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't, or Peter Schiff. One of the Peters who has like $1 billion. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many Peters. Yeah. You can move down there 183 days. You pay no federal taxes, but you don't get to vote. So, I mean,
wasn't there some sort of like vote on Puerto Rico becoming a state recently?
Well, I don't know.
How does that work out? I don't know. I truly don't know the ins and outs of that.
So from what my like super base level understanding is that you can make Puerto Rico a state, which I think the Democrats think would tilt the electoral college even more in their favor because it would be their theory is it would probably vote blue more so than not.
Right.
And they would also do it with the District of Columbia, which also would clearly be a blue entity. And so that's, I think, why having a balance of power in our government is so important and why the Senate runoffs in Georgia are going to be paramount. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if Biden's the president because he won't be able to get anything done if he doesn't control both the House and the Senate. Yeah,
it's the whole gridlock versus not thing.
Yeah. But we've heard enough about politics over the last few weeks.
I have no interest in talking about politics.
Yeah. Those guys are fucking idiots.
Yeah, you have to be. I always think of like the Mark Twain quote about like the first thing that should disqualify you from being president is the desire to be president.
Exactly.
I think that probably is true also of like Congress people and whatnot.
I think the lower level you are on the political spectrum and like what you're running for, there's a more of an idea that you can affect real change in your community. I don't know that it always plays out like that, but I think that that's the thing. And then like the higher up you go,
I agree with that. Yeah.
the more you progress in a political career, the more beholden you become to these outside entities. And then whatever the idealistic goal you had right from the rip was, that shit's totally gone.
Totally.
Next thing you know, you're fucking sucking Raytheon's bank account.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that,
that was a good recovery.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah, thanks.
I think that, I agree. It's probably the case that if you're president, it's like every day you have to like make Sophie's choice, and no one can. You have to sell your soul for that. But that can be for another day.
That could be for another day. Anyway, differences and similarities in between teaching a scholastic endeavor versus an endeavor that's equally scholastic and physical simultaneously, like jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I think that like teaching high school, like I think I was sort of saying before, I think has way more to do with the like social and emotional component of like like engaging with high school kids, like that takes up way more of the bandwidth of like teaching in a public school. Whereas I think a good thing about teaching jiu-jitsu is like you get to sort of just, this is at least my feeling, and this may be different for you because you run the whole place, so you probably feel differently about this, but I feel like when I teach, it's like I don't care about making anyone feel good. I don't care about
there's freedom in that.
Absolutely there is, right? I don't care about making people feel good. I don't care about sort of like assuaging the I don't even know how to say it, assuaging the feelings of the people I'm teaching. I care about communicating jiu-jitsu techniques to them. And I feel like that, to me, it's awesome that I only have to worry about that. So that to me is like the major thing. It's like, how do I best teach the jiu-jitsu techniques outside of any social context, any sort of like relationship context? I think fortunately, sometimes you do develop relationships with people where it's like, oh, you're sort of more, it's almost like you're more of my student than another person. That's not necessarily a fair way to say it. And again, you probably disagree with this because you're
no, I don't.
Place.
So you get a room full of a bunch of people, right? Mm-hmm. And like you tend to gravitate towards the people who demonstrate the move closer to you, where you are. In a big room, it's difficult to walk throughout the room and correct people. But I think that the people who show up regularly, the people that work, what you think, the people you think are working harder, which might not always be accurate, but also more or less the people that buy into what you're doing. Like it's difficult. Like if I'm trying to teach a bunch of techniques and there's someone in the back of the room who's modifying everything, they've been on the mat for 3 weeks, I've been on the mat for 30 years, and they're modifying a technique in the back because they want it to look cool. Like I'm less likely to go and try and reach that person because I see it as more difficult and time consuming. The time spent trying to get through to that person could be better spent getting through to someone who I think is a little bit more invested in the buy-in, and therefore I can get my message across to that person, and then a rising tide raises all ships, and then they'll be able to disseminate that information to others. So in terms of like doing that, the social aspect of it, and then more importantly, the business aspect of it, as I say all the time, if you're a gym owner, the best way to teach jiu-jitsu is not congruent with the best way to run a jiu-jitsu gym. And that's why like I envy you to a point where you just get to go in and show what works, and you don't have to worry about a lot of the things that concern me when I teach. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I feel particularly lucky in this scenario where it's like I teach a class or in privates and whatnot. And it's sort of like, I literally only care about teaching grappling to these people who want to learn it. And I don't even think about like, are you going to sign up or not? Are you interested in what I'm teaching? But are you disseminating the information the same way? What are the differences in terms of like when you're teaching in high school? Like, do you have a systemized way that you approach high school teaching that's different from the way you teach jiu-jitsu? And just for the 3 people listening, I don't know what you're an expert on in the classroom, but you are without a doubt an expert in jiu-jitsu. And so maybe that is something that just is so natural to you that teaching the material is a different procedure. I think, well, a couple things. I think that like, I think I would teach differently if I taught half the classes of the week. I think that teaching jiu-jitsu given the amount I teach at the gym currently, I think I would do things differently if I taught more, because I would think I personally, now I teach one specific class a week, but then I teach like some privates and stuff. I concern myself more with like, okay, what would be like an edifying like group of techniques or ideas or whatever to teach for this one particular class. If I was teaching like half the classes of the week, I would think much more in terms of like curriculum. Like I would try and focus on like developing specific skills over like a period of time. And so that would change like my teaching.
And how would you develop the skills over a period of time? Like, do you have an approach that you think would work best for that?
For teaching jiu-jitsu, I think I would this is like a thing that requires experimentation, but I guess because you have to like, anything requires feedback to understand if you this is a big difference actually between like teaching jiu-jitsu and teaching like school. Is jiu-jitsu, because it's physical and because it's so competitive, literally it's like obviously one-on-one, someone wins at the end of every go basically, right? Like the feedback is so immediate. It's easier to learn things where the feedback is immediate.
So when you're teaching in school, what's the feedback? Is it a standardized test or a test that you provide?
In school, for my particular subject, it's a test that I provide, but and actually it's not even, don't think of it just as tests. Think of it as that you can have like a variety of different types of assessments, right? Like assessment is sort of like the word that catches all of the things that you would like.
Probably can't even say test anymore. People get too.
No, see, you're wrong here, bro. Yeah. No, you can. In school, the feedback has to do with like, I mean, it could be a million different things. It could be like, it could be a writing assignment. It could be a conversation, like, or a discussion or whatever. It could be sort of like a writing prompt. It could be a classic test. It could be like a million different things.
And what is it in jiu-jitsu?
In jiu-jitsu, it's like, do you win, or does this thing work or not? And like,
what's the measure of does this thing work?
That's a great question. Does this thing work? It has to work against multiple different people over the course. Like,
so then multiple different people, and in a traditional gym, you're training with the same people all the time. So how do you see if it works against multiple different people? What's the best way to do that?
This is a leading question, by the way. But what you want me to say is you have to go compete against other people who you don't normally train with, which I agree. I mean, yeah,
that's a great idea.
Yeah. I feel like I was somehow part of an advertisement there, but I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. To test whether or not your techniques work, you have to test them in sort of the crucible of competition. At the same time, though, I mean, people do jiu-jitsu for a million different reasons, and some people don't do it to compete or whatever. You can still test.
That's fair.
You can still test that out, like between and among your training partners. And I think what is cool about jiu-jitsu is you really do get immediate feedback about whether or not what you're doing works. And so you can adjust more quickly. I think the learning process is like hyper speed. Not everyone takes the opportunity to that they have to adjust the techniques they're doing to figure out if they work or not, because for whatever reason, they're too hard-headed or something, too stubborn. They think they should be doing something that maybe they shouldn't be doing. I mean, a lot of stuff gets in the way, but what's cool about it is the opportunity is there to learn really quickly if you respond to the feedback that you're experiencing.
So how do you reconcile getting the mental aspect of teaching jiu-jitsu across to someone while simultaneously getting them to physically do the right things? Because some people, their minds and their body don't work on the same level or in conjunction or simultaneously. So what's the best way to do that?
What do you mean by mental? What do you mean getting the mental and physical on the same page?
So there are a lot of people that are just really instinctive grapplers, and when they do jiu-jitsu, it's like things just make sense to them. But I say a lot of people, but I think that's kind of the minority.
Yeah, I would agree.
There are some people who either see the physical part of it first and just try to make their body do it. And there are other people that see the mental side and try and understand why their body should be doing these things and then try and put their body in the right position to do them. But somewhere in marrying those two things, you can have someone whose mind is on one page and their body is on another. And therefore they don't really understand what they're doing, or they're not able to do the thing they think they should be doing. So how do you take a guy and explain, here are the leverage points, here's what you should be doing. Now let's get your body to do those things. Whereas I feel like when you're teaching an academic subject, you're just trying to get someone's mind working in the right direction. Here you got the body also.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, like I can say that the way, and this might not be fair because maybe I'm one of the outlier people, right? Because I've been able, for whatever reason, or maybe it's just a matter of, for whatever reason, I really love jiu-jitsu and I train it so consistently or whatever. I can say that a big part of my learning was like literally watching and then trying to imitate other people. And then eventually that builds like a foundation for you that you can then like work off of. And I think that I get the sense that that's not like emphasized enough as like a valid way of learning physical things. But I do understand that some people are in a situation where it's like they're just, whatever you want to call it, maybe they're not athletic or...
Well, that's an initiative thing too. You take that upon yourself to observe other people and emulate what's successful. And that begs the question, where does the teacher's job end and the student's job begin?
Yeah, I agree. Like, this won't necessarily answer that specific question, but maybe it's like, it's just something to think about and maybe it can be discussed. But like, I wonder if like a valid way of teaching jiu-jitsu would be, so the way it's taught now, and this is maybe like a trend in jiu-jitsu, is that it's like very analytical and like
everybody wants to act like they're some, fucking, intellectual like guru,
yes,
breaking everything down into minutia and using, polysyllabic words where they don't fit for their Instagram post just to get a bunch of likes and feel good about themselves.
Right.
Let's not
that's even a whole other conversation,
Yeah,
Instagram thing. But no, but I understand what you're saying, that like it seems like the trend right now is super analytical and cerebral and sort of communicating the details of jiu-jitsu that way. I think that there's a lot of good to it. I also wonder, like, sometimes is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, do people actually get out of that type of teaching what the teacher thinks they're communicating to the student, if that makes sense?
Yes.
I wonder if a legitimate way to teach would be to be like, I'm literally not going to say anything. Like, just copy me. Like at the same time, just imitate exactly what I'm doing. Look at the way I look when I do this technique, or not even me. Maybe it's like, go watch
Roger Gracie.
Go watch Roger Gracie. Go watch Marcelo Garcia. Go watch like Lucas Lepri or Leo Vieira. Try and make yourself like internally feel like what you think they feel like when they like do these techniques. I
think that's easy for you. I think you started grappling at such a young age that you have a different feel for your body. And I think that when you have a room full of 50 different shaped people with different personalities, I think you have to offer an explanation to them so that when they look at what they're doing and they seem like, or they feel like, man, I can't look like Roger Gracie doing this. Well, of course you can't, because you're 5'3" and you're, a stocky build. You're not going to look like Roger Gracie. There has to be some level of explanation there so that people understand that and then don't create a negative feedback loop for themselves.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear that. I also think though that there's like validity to, and maybe I'm making a little too much. I think the way I'm talking about it right now, where it's like, you literally don't say anything. I think I'm just maybe making a point, but, it could be, it's almost like not to be cheesy or whatever, but it's like a Bruce Lee, like, don't think, feel sort of thing, where it's like,
there's nothing cheesy about Bruce Lee.
No, he's the man. Yeah. Or have you read that book, The Inner Game of Tennis?
I started to read it because Howie Clark told me to read it when he was training with us.
Right. Well, I think like a major element of that book is sort of like, I think the guy who wrote the book or whatever was teaching tennis, obviously, and he was trying to teach his like students declaratively, like, do this, then that, think about this. And the whole thing that gets in the way is like thinking slows you down and gets in the way.
Right. And
it makes you wonder, could you just be like, okay, you're focusing on, I don't know exactly how to say it. Bottom line is, it makes me wonder if you could learn by way of imitation, and then once you once you can imitate to a certain extent, then you get to the declarative stuff where it's like you're explaining the really detailed Roger Gracie type stuff where it's like he does the mounted cross choke in a way that is like so much cleaner than what is typically taught. And it's like, okay, now I'm at a level where I can add this in. Like I think it's maybe a thing that like scales up over time.
But at what point is there a body type thing that aids or prohibits you from being able to do that? So just understanding it and like getting to that point where you feel like you're doing it right. I mean, you could have a body type issue that doesn't allow you to do certain things. And this will be like a tiered comment. And at what point is it that you need to learn, you teach someone a concept, but you have to frame it around a technique. And then you get into the argument of, is the best way to teach someone by showing them the techniques or by teaching them the concept?
Yeah. Okay. I think that speaks to maybe the learning curve or like the different stages of learning. So like a beginner, an intermediate person, and an advanced person, to use sort of like the old school, like Naga Grappler's Quest divisions, right?
Right.
Like,
I was always in the advanced division.
From day one in advance.
I did. First
Nice.
day, did expert.
Nice.
Back in 99.
I don't remember when the first, maybe 2006 or 7 was my first expert division.
What a time to be alive.
But all those different groups learn differently, right? So I think my opinion is like for the beginner group, it's silly to try and teach them in any sort of like conceptual way because they just don't have the scaffolding to
Right.
place those concepts about grappling or whatever it is. I think you have to teach the concepts through the particulars for the beginner people,
I
right?
agree.
You have to show them specifically like the positions that are common in jiu-jitsu. And here's some, it's like you're filling the toolbox, right? And then over time, they get to a point where the toolbox has sufficient tools in it or whatever to continue the metaphor. You're like building a house or something. And it's like, then you can teach them conceptually about, and at this point, I can't even necessarily think of a concept that you might try and impart on someone.
Guard retention is the hardest concept that I teach people.
Right.
To me. And you have to show a bunch of like ways to retain guard.
Right.
But at the same time, there is a conceptual aspect to it because the technique you show someone to retain guard, man, that shit never happens in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so then you're doing the technique and you're wondering why it didn't work. Well, no technique, especially under duress, will work perfectly the way you train it in the gym. So understanding the conceptual side of it will help you to make the necessary real-time adjustments. And I think that takes a level of expertise, maybe not expertise, but definitely a level of experience to be doing stuff like that.
Yeah, agreed. I think right, like the techniques, any technique you show, it never works out that way in like a live situation. And so the student, I guess, has to have the understanding that that's the case. And you're more teaching like almost, it's like familial resemblance. It's like you're going to do a technique that looks like this. This is like,
Right.
This is like the base version of whatever it is you're going to do. And it never actually works out like that. It'd be great if it worked out like that, but
It'd be money. I'd be undefeated.
Yeah, right. But you're trying to do something that resembles the thing that I'm teaching you, and then over time that can become more abstract, right? Like teaching about, I don't know, like maybe a concept would be like control of inside space. You can tell a beginner that you ought to always control the inside space. But then when they're actually going live against someone in the heat of it, where they're breathing heavy and they're like, they're getting
Their heart rate's beating and
really
they're forgetting
high,
what the
their
hell's going
heart's
on.
like in their throat. It's like, they're not going to be able to access that idea of, oh, I should be trying to control the inside space here. So instead you have to teach them through specific techniques that it so happens involve the control of inside space, and then over time that gets like sort of beat into their head, and then they just naturally do that thing, and then eventually when they're good at that, you can tell them, this is a thing you've been doing all along. but you can do it in other positions too. And if you can think about it in those positions, because you're able to sort of like when you're advanced, you see more frames per second, basically, right?
Right.
Like, and so when you see more frames per second, you can then engage with each of those frames in like a conscious way.
I always think that like when learning any combat sport or like anything that marries your understanding with your mind and your physical ability to do the thing, for me, those things never clicked at the same time. It would be like a Tetris piece. I could understand something mentally for 6 months and never be able to accomplish it physically. But then the day that you accomplish it physically, it's like a Tetris piece, the perfect Tetris piece came down, and then boom, you just dropped, like you cleared like 6 rows.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. You're doing something, you don't really even understand why. And then the moment you understand why, it creates this entire ecosystem for you.
Yeah.
Which brings me to another question, which is like, what are your thoughts on all these people teaching specific manifestos, blueprints, pillars, and systems to people? And then, I mean, I understand why they're teaching them, but what are your thoughts on people consuming these systems and blindly being loyal to like one person's blueprint?
Yeah. I think that those, I think whatever the systems are or blueprints or like game plans, whatever you want to call it, I think for a lot of people, it takes you really far. Like you can win, like if you are committed to whatever, you have to buy in a lot to whatever the system is, quote unquote. And also I really believe that I think it's probably really hard to adopt a system from someone who you are not coached by directly.
Because you get no feedback.
No feedback. And you're making, whether you want to believe it or not, you're making a lot of assumptions about what that system entails. Even if you've watched every single video on the system, blueprint, game plan, whatever it is. There's
a level of perception. No, I'm not to cut you off and I want to go back to it, but there's a level of perceptual awareness also. When someone's teaching you something and then you feel how they do it to you, 100%, it's so much different.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, I definitely don't want to knock it because I think it can.
No, I don't
think
either.
It's super, super effective to follow whatever the system is, right? Super effective. I think at the same time, it depends. I think that it depends on sort of what has come before your understanding of what those systems are. Mm-hmm. And whatever you've learned up to that point influences how you're going to adopt the new stuff that you're learning. And I don't know. It's tough for me to figure out because like all of it is really, really effective. And there's so much good jiu-jitsu that you can learn online. But the reality is like everyone is just sort of like in their gym training with each other and they're using all of these cool new techniques. And it's really cool to like be up to date on the trends in jiu-jitsu and stuff. But then I think like
have you heard of close guard?
Right. Yeah.
Because that shit always works.
Yeah. Right. It's timeless, like blue jeans.
Yeah. My problem with the systems is not like the techniques. And I think the amount of content that's available online right now is awesome for people who are training jiu-jitsu now. My only problem is that for every awesome system or blueprint or whatever that's put out, some dickhead's putting some bullshit out there. And as a new jiu-jitsu consumer, sometimes you don't have the experience to know the difference between what's worthwhile and what's not worthwhile. So you might be picking up great habits from like Danaher, but you might also be picking up some shitty habits from some guy that nobody ever heard of,
yeah,
you know, in his gym. And that's a problem. And I think, that's the first phase of the problem. The second phase of the problem, I think, is more holistic to online learning or blueprints or systems or whatever you want to call them, which is when you adhere strictly to a blueprint or a system and someone poses a problem to you, you only have answers from that blueprint or that system to address the problem with.
Yeah. I think you just phrased what I think I wanted to come up with like a second ago, which is that, it like limits your ability to problem solve for yourself. And you want to believe that whatever it is you're consuming is like giving you the tools to problem solve, but it's actually not. It's just giving you the category or group of techniques that you're going to reference every single time.
Right.
You want to like figure something out in jiu-jitsu. And there are different types of people here too, because like some people, let's say what you're after is just tournament success. I think that the stuff that you can consume online will take you really, really far in those terms. Like you'll be able to win a lot of tournaments with that. I also personally think, and I know others would disagree with me or whatever, but I think jiu-jitsu is way bigger for me. Like what I like about it is like it involves a lot more than just like going and trying to win tournaments. Maybe I'm saying that because I wish I won more tournaments than when
I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah, I guess everyone wishes they won more tournaments.
If we didn't care, we would stop entering.
Sure, right. But I think like it maybe constricts the opportunities or like the possibilities in jiu-jitsu if you're like always like sort of beholden to like, oh, what's like the next new thing that I'm going to look at? Like Lachlan's got this awesome thing. By the way, he has some of the best stuff out there on the internet.
Right.
But at the same time, if you're always just waiting for what his next thing is, it's like, how much are you engaging with, like the realities of your training in the gym that you're at?
But also people like are watching these techniques of these awesome instructors whose games have developed based on their personality and physical attributes. And then it's like, you know, you're a guy with no flexibility and you're 5'3" and you're trying to do some of these techniques from some of these, like, you know, you're not going to do Adam Wardzinski type stuff when you have no flexibility and, you know, and you're short and stocky. Like
right.
People don't,
you might do Adam Wardzinski stuff, but
you might, right. But
in that particular case,
people
but yes, I know what you mean.
People forget that they're guys who are successful in tournaments and are great teachers. They've done so because of a combination of factors, like you were saying before about learning in high school. What was it like? Your mental, your what were the three things you said
like
about
bio, psychosocial, like sort of like
right?
Yeah.
So in this case, maybe it's like physical, psychosocial,
yeah, whatever.
You know, and the social is like
yeah.
your training partners, and it's the same thing. And just because you can imitate what some guys are doing on videotape to, you know, some guy who looks like you roofied him on Instagram, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to pull it off in tournaments. I also think that aside from systems people, there are gyms that teach you just how to win tournaments. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a difference. There are some people who are winning tournaments with systems, and there are people who are winning tournaments by gaming the system of the tournament. And there's a difference.
Interesting. Yeah.
I have more respect for people who are winning tournaments with a system than people who are learning how to game a point set or a rule set and saying, I'm going to get an advantage here and I'm going to stick you in 50-50 and I'm going to ride this motherfucker out for the next 8 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that is an issue. And I do think there are gyms that teach you how to do that.
Right. I totally hear that. I mean, and again, maybe this is just like an excuse or something, or I'm giving myself an out, like sort of psychologically, but I absolutely have lost matches before where I walked off the mat going like, I don't really feel like we figured out who was better here. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like I know that, yeah, maybe, and this has happened on where I've won even too, right? Where it's like, yeah, other guy's hand got raised or my hand got raised, but I'm not totally sure. Like, this is supposed to be sort of like a combat sport, and I'm not exactly sure who was better at combat here.
Right.
I just know that after 10 minutes, one of our hands got raised. And I think to your point, like the guys who are winning with a system where they're like submitting people all the time, or just think of like the classic guy like Roger Marcelo Kron, right?
Finishing everybody.
If you tap everyone, Gordon, right? Like
Gordon
whatever
too.
you think about him, like if you're submitting everyone, like what can they say about you?
Nothing.
Right. And I think I still feel that fortunately, like that's like at the heart of jiu-jitsu for like a group of people. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that are consumed with like sort of only what's new or winning tournaments on an advantage after being, you know, in 50-50 for 10 minutes.
Or showing some crazy technique they could never pull off in a competition on some willing component on Instagram just to get a bunch of likes.
Right. So the other thing in this too is I always think that it's like everyone loves sort of like the Danahers, the Lachlan's, the Ryan Halls and stuff. And it's like they clearly have like a really like a true insight on jiu-jitsu that they can teach. But it's like, if you're just like what you like about them is the fact that they're trying to problem solve themselves. But if you just follow them, you're not doing the thing that's cool about them. Like, couldn't you also be paying attention to what they're showing, because what they're showing is awesome and you can incorporate it into your own game, but couldn't you also do what they're doing? Not necessarily that you're going to be as good as them, because like there's obviously they're the outliers here. Like they're exceptional in a certain way for whatever reason, but like, couldn't you engage in the same process that they're engaging in?
The way I think of it is, if you want to be an artist, and I know nothing about art, if you want to be an artist, you're not going to go and just try and like copy the Mona Lisa by paint by numbers, because that shit's never going to work out. You're going to always end up with a shittier version of the Mona Lisa, and people are going to giggle at you behind your back, no matter how many likes you get on Instagram.
Yeah.
What you should be doing is like thinking about the process of creating the Mona Lisa and working to understand the colors and how they work together and like how those things form and shape together to create some sort of like cooler shit than when you started with just a palette of different colors. And I worry that when people adhere to someone else's systems or whatever, sure, you might get a bunch of victories and stuff like that, but it will limit like your own development in terms of understanding holistically grappling and or jiu-jitsu, because now you're just bound by this one system. And maybe it's a great system and that's fine, and it got you some tournament wins. But now what are you going to teach if you ever decide to turn around and teach? What are you going to teach? Are you going to teach that person's system again, or are you going to teach like your take on it? I think it's incumbent upon the student, and this goes into like the beginning of the student's responsibility and the end of the teacher's responsibility, to take each technique as a color on a palette. And you got to figure out how they work together for you, your personality and your body type at a specific moment in time, rather than just trying to recreate something fucking awesome that someone else has done. It's great that they've done that. And you should pay more attention to how they went about doing that than the result of what happened when they did do it.
Yeah, right. I agree. And also talking about artists or whatever, like, and the people we've mentioned so far, right? Like, who have we talked about? Like Roger, Marcelo, Kron, you can name a million others.
Yeah.
Right. Or not a million, but a few others,
10.
I guess. Yeah. The thing that's cool about them is like, they were just themselves. Like, that it seemed like they were not copying other people. They took, again, not to like use like cheesy Bruce Lee lines, right? But like they took what made sense to them and then used it, and they discarded the rest, and it worked out for them. And it's like everyone has, it seems like, at least in jiu-jitsu, right? Like everyone has the opportunity to do that thing.
Right.
And insofar as you're just sort of like like you're tethered to whatever the trends are online, or whatever the trend, like whatever the Reddit BJJ is like putting on there.
Right.
It's like you're not doing that thing, but it's like available to you. Like it's literally available to everyone. Right?
Yeah, I think it's also like important to know the difference between a trend and an innovation. Like a trend is something that's going to come and go, and it's going to be effective for a short period of time. And then in another period of time, it'll either be totally disregarded, or it'll just become like a normal aspect of what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. But it's the staples, the things you build around, that become like building blocks of your game that last forever. And those are the things I think that people neglect. Like when I go in the gym and I see people like who can barely hip escape, but what they're doing before class is they're like pushing someone up into the air with their feet, trying to invert and go underneath them. I think that's useful. But I think what happens when you fail at that is you wind up in a position where now your guard's been passed, you're getting smashed, and you know, in a tournament you're losing points, and in the real world you're losing your car and your wallet and your girl. Mm-hmm. And had you spent a little more time doing the boring things, it makes inverting and throwing people up over your head less risky, because you can recover from those, because you have the secondary and tertiary moves to back all that stuff up. And I think that's probably an aspect that you don't see when you're teaching like an academic pursuit. No one's trying to do the highlight reel shit in history class.
Right. Yeah. Good point. That's a totally different thing. Like people are not, history class does not have anything to do with like Instagram. Like, right. Like social media is not social media is a serious impediment to teaching high school kids, but it's not an impediment in the same way that it is for teaching like jiu-jitsu students who are basically adults most of the time. And I think to an extent, like social media is really good for, there's a level of student who understands that there are different people and there are different approaches. But I think a lot of times it can be detrimental when a brand new person comes in
and they see one person online on one website does it one way, and one person online on one website does it another way, and they view it as binary.
Yeah.
And they don't understand that there are multiple ways to do this based on your personality and body type, and they just instantly discount one person as wrong and accredit one person as being right. And you don't really have the experience to know that that's not true. But now your jiu-jitsu is built on this idea that guy A was right and guy B was wrong, and neither one of them are giving you any feedback.
Yeah. And there's an element of like, I don't know what you would call it, maybe like credentialing or something, where like people who are and to some extent it's reasonable. Like you see people online who have had incredible success in tournaments, right? I mean, the if you can tap everyone at ADCC, like clearly you're doing something right. But to perceive everything they show as gospel as opposed to what your instructor is showing you, like you might be comparing them in the wrong way or whatever.
Right.
You might be missing out on like certain aspects of the spectrum of possibilities in jiu-jitsu or something, because you're too caught up in like sort of what you perceive as like, this guy has all the answers. My instructor has not had the same success that this guy has had, and therefore my instructor's answers are not as valuable or something. And it's a hard thing to parse, because it's like, again, a lot of the stuff that you find online is super like edifying and will actually make your jiu-jitsu better.
So we have a friend in common who is a strength conditioning coach in a pretty high profile job. Mm-hmm. And he often asks me, what do you do when you try and teach something? And the answer that you get from the people you're charged with teaching is, well, online they do it this way. And he is always like, I mean, what the fuck am I even doing here? If every time I try and tell someone to do something, they can just Google some reason why that's not what they should be doing. Like, why are we even here? What's the job even for?
Totally. And I actually think this might be the thing that connects the two worlds, like the teaching jiu-jitsu or whatever, and then teaching like young people, is like the thing that goes maybe unappreciated or unnoticed or whatever, is like the human element involved in like communicating whatever the techniques you have, right? Like that you're going to communicate to your students. You can do it in a way that's like qualitatively different than whatever anyone online can do. And that goes further. Like you can create sort of like a culture in your gym. You can create sort of like an attitude in your gym. You can create sort of like an experience that's geared toward like improving people over time. You can do that all in your gym in a way that like YouTube can't. Same thing. Right. Same thing goes with like teaching school. It's like you create the atmosphere that facilitates like whatever the learning is. Maybe the learning is simply just about like the people involved, or maybe it's about the content involved, or ideally both. But
so maybe that's the answer. I think there's a great custom auto quote that we could have ended with you find the spark and you take that spark and you turn it into an inferno, whatever that quote is.
And the whole thing is that it can go both ways. The fire can destroy you, or the fire can be a thing that sustains you.
And it's up to the teacher to create the environment that's going to move it in a positive way.
Yeah.
Well, I think we covered a lot of shit there, and it's early enough that we should open a bottle of tequila and go offline here and see what else we can discuss.
Word.
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming down to my little nest of freedom here, Sean Fisher. And I think everyone should click the subscribe button, because these little episodes are getting better and better, and they're full of little treasure troves of knowledge and insight. Thanks for coming down.
Thank you, sir.
As always, thanks for listening, everybody. Please hit the subscribe button. You can follow us on YouTube at Please Allow Me, and on the gram at Please Allow Me Podcast. I'll see you out there.